Dan, thanks so much for joining me as my very, very first guest.
It's exciting. Very
So
exciting.
I'll do a quick introduction if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks, Dan. So Bimbling Books and Beer, what an amazing social media. I just every time I go on, I'm like, I need to be in Cornwall right now. But yeah, as I'll introduce you, Dan. So you are a content creator and you're helping others to see value in spending time outdoors and then also promoting positive mental health. I think I've got that
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah, absolutely. Through the power of walking, books and beer, hopefully.
Amazing. I love it. I love it, especially the beer part. But
Yeah.
so, Dan, the reason why we're talking today, so obviously being the founder now of Reframe Ed, helping teachers kind of transition out of education when they feel slightly trapped,
Yeah.
you've got a past story to your current world, as it were. So I think we've obviously connected on that, and I'd love to talk to you about that if that's possible.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
because Dan used to be a teacher, so
Yeah.
why? Let's start with why. Why did you become a teacher? What drew you to it?
I think I've always been drawn to education, not specifically education, but I think the process of educating others. I think that's what I've always been drawn to. So my qualifications, if you will, I've got a degree in outdoor leadership. So it was outdoor education that I was drawn to originally. I believe in the healing power of nature, not in a spiritual way, um, just in it's a fantastic place to go and reset and recalibrate everything. So yeah, initially when I left school, I left with no GCSEs. I think I left with one C, and back then, we're talking 20 years ago now. That's scary. Back then, if you left with no GCSEs, there wasn't that much support for young people leaving school with no GCSEs. It was kind of, well, you can't get into college, which is where everyone else is going. So what do you do? Um, so yeah, originally I wanted to be a marine zoologist, believe it or not.
Very
Um,
cool. Very, very
yeah.
cool job.
So anyway, when I left school, I went back and did another 2 years of GCSEs to get my five, what were C levels then, to get into a college. And I went on to study moving image production, which is quite funny because I left that path very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I loved moving image production, but back then, editing software and cameras were not what they are today. And I didn't enjoy sitting at a computer for that amount of time. So I left it and went into outdoor education. And I think, I loved that just because I love the process of educating others. And I think that's what's really, is a really key thing to recognize here is that yes, I've changed career from becoming a teacher, but I'm still a storyteller, an educator. I still educate people on one of my series is called Hidden History, where I visit different historical places in Cornwall that people don't know about. And I have to research about that place and then tell the story of that place on camera. And I love that because it's passing knowledge on. So I think for me, that was one of the main things that drew me to teaching was that I like to pass knowledge on to others. Quite simply, that's why. I think some of the other things that drew me to teaching were similar to other people in that I wanted a bit of stability, and teaching is seen in this country as quite a stable career or has been in the past.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to be able to progress. So at the time, I'd kind of flitted between jobs and areas of work. I'm a qualified chef, I'm a qualified PT, I'm a qualified outdoor activities instructor. I've done lots of things in my 36 years on this planet, but I wanted stability at that point. I wanted to be in one place where I could progress and yeah, I could move forward. And the biggest thing for me was that I wanted a respected career. I come out
Mhm.
of school with no qualifications. And as a result of that, I think I lost the majority of my school friends because they were going on to run, big companies and organizations and this, that, and the other. And I just had to recalibrate. So yeah, I think I wanted stability, I wanted progression, I wanted a respected career path, and I wanted that enjoyment of passing knowledge on to others. I think that was really what drew me to teaching in the first place. But it's been a long process. I only got into teaching 10 years ago,
Mhm.
and I'm 36 and I've done lots of other careers before then. So I think one of the key things that drew me in was my attraction to SEND, special educational needs. So
Yeah.
when I first moved down to Cornwall, it was I'd had an injury and had to move down here with my parents. And I trained to become a chef because I love cooking and I love food. And that just wasn't for me. So I went into a college and got a job as a learning support assistant, as a teaching assistant in the SEND department, and absolutely loved the work that was being done, to promote the physical, emotional, mental health and physical health of young people with special educational needs across Cornwall. And I was there for a year. And after that first year, I said, that's it. I could do this. I want to do this. I want all those other things that I've just spoke about. But I want to do it in SEND, specifically in SEND. So, yeah, I think that was what drew me in originally. Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, and I think you can see through your content on your social media platforms that the storytelling aspect, to go back to that part, is so strong, and being able to show others or help others explore different experiences and opportunities and understand the outdoors and mental health as well. And you picked upon there like your SEND work as well, and around the mental health side of things, which is such an important aspect. And I remember when I was a teacher, the storytelling was the really fun part when you're there teaching in the classroom. I used to teach sport, but I also did a bit of humanities as well. So when we're doing like history of, I don't know, 1066, for example, you're telling the story of what happened and then getting the children to explore why things happened, what the ramifications were.
Absolutely.
And that's the fun part. And I think a lot of people will look at what Reframe Ed is and it's like, oh, you're just trying to get people out of teaching. It's like, no. I loved teaching. Yeah. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
But there is a turning point at times, isn't there? And I think there is a point at which people go into teaching because they love teaching, and that's what the job is so amazing for. However, there are turning points, and I speak to teachers all over the country. I've got clients over the globe, in fact, who there's just times when teaching becomes kind of secondary in the role of being a teacher. And I don't know whether or not there was like a turning point for you, or a slow burning problem that kind of reoccurred, as to why you then left a job that we both loved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a question that I do get asked nowadays. I was on the radio yesterday doing an interview with a Cornish radio presenter down here, and it's been a year now since I left my job as a teacher, and it was one of the things that we spoke about. How did you, off air, we spoke about how did you know you wanted to give up teaching, like what happened? And I think for me, it was a gradual burnout. It wasn't like right, that's it, I'm leaving now. I didn't go in one day, a situation happened and I said, right, I'm leaving. It was a gradual thing. It was years of erosion of trust in the system, and the fact that, like you say, teaching has become, unfortunately, not about the process of teaching. I loved being in the classroom. One of the subjects that I taught, which I was very passionate about, was called land-based studies. And because I was taught in the FE and it was SEND, we could kind of reinvent subjects as we saw fit. So it was kind of take on geography, with a main focus on the land. We incorporated fishing into that as well. So we gave students a practical application, if you will, to go out and enjoy the great outdoors and learn about a landscape and an environment. And I absolutely loved teaching that with a passion. And I made a whole term, a whole term's worth of curriculum out of the one subject, which was David Attenborough's, I can't remember what it's called now. It was the series where he visits different landscapes around the globe. So it'd be like tundra or the deep ocean or the high seas. And we spent, 3 to 4 weeks learning about tundra or rainforests. Mm-hmm. And we did some incredible work on it. And then at the end of the lesson, so we had 2 halves of the lessons, and then the second half of the lesson we would watch the documentary, or watch part of the documentary that week, and then the following week we'd watch the next part. Now that's like quite a big taboo subject in a classroom, to put on a documentary and allow somebody else to pass on knowledge. Why? David Attenborough can say it better than any educator in the country.
He's not a bad storyteller, is he?
He is one of the best storytellers and educators in the country. So why would I try and better that? Anyway, lots of these things happened, these small situations where I kind of questioned the process of teaching. Why can't I do that? Why aren't we allowing others to pass on knowledge? And yeah, I worked extremely hard in what I was doing to improve the subjects, the offer for the students, and my rapport and my professionalism within the classroom. And I managed to maintain outstanding lesson observations for 5 years after qualifying, which was huge. And a lot of the other teachers that were around me didn't. And during that time, I continuously had this desire to progress, as we all do. I don't know many teachers that go into a job and go, do you know what? I'm happy just doing 2 days a week. I'm just going to stick like this. And I wanted to progress. And like many job roles, I was constantly gaslighted. I think that's a strong word, but I'm going to use it. I was gaslighted by the constant premise of prove yourself this year and next year it will come good for you. I'm sure a lot of teachers listening to this or watching this will be able to what's the word I'm looking for? Relate to that.
Like assimilate with it, right?
We'll be able to relate to that. Yeah, because it happens so much, and not just in teaching as well, in all careers. Working for somebody else, that person is always trying to get more out of you for the same amount of money. I've not worked in a place yet, education or not, where they've said you can do more work and this is what we're going to give you as a result. I know there are places out there like that, but that's just me being a bit pessimistic. Anyway, for years and years and years, I continued doing this. And I can remember applying for a full-time teaching job in the department that I've been teaching in for 2.5 years during COVID, just at the end of COVID, sorry. And I'd been qualified for 2 years. I'd been teaching full-time hours. I taught throughout COVID digitally. I worked really hard. I was on a temporary contract, so I got paid for what lessons I taught. And I applied for one of these jobs and interviewed really well. I thought it was my time. And somebody else there was lots of other people got the job. Quite a few people got the job from out of department, weren't even in the college, weren't even in that area. And one of them got the job and he wasn't even a qualified teacher. And I thought, why? I'm a qualified teacher. I've been qualified for 2.5 years now. I've maintained outstanding. I've done everything you've asked of me. Why? Anyway, I continued to be professional in that environment. You can't let those things affect you. And I think that's where my gradual sort of erosion of trust in the system came from. So it wasn't one big turning point. I just felt strung along. It exhausted me, to be honest, the constant do this to prove that. And in the end, you start to become a bit sort of pessimistic and negative about it. And that eventually starts drawing on your mental health. And I don't think I'd realised how tricky that was until there were other factors in my life that had changed. And it all kind of boiled over into one. And actually, in the end, work was the tipping point. It wasn't the catalyst. It was like I'm done with life now. I can't work and everything else. I can't do it. And I burnt out in glorious fashion. At the time I was a PGCE mentor. I'd just become a school governor in another school that I was in. I'd recently lost a position that was higher up than what I was currently in. And I just said in the end, I just said enough's enough. I'm 10 years into teaching. I've maintained outstanding. Why am I still being scrutinized to this level when you know what I'm capable of teaching in the classroom? So for me, it wasn't one thing. It was like a constant build up.
Yeah, and there's that. I think people forget how emotionally not draining, but the requirement for emotion in teaching, because you are dealing with multiple other people's lives and trying to improve them. And I find teachers have to kind of swallow almost their own emotions with that.
Absolutely.
And you have to just put on effectively a brave face every single day, because you are performing in front of a class of children, very impressionable children who look up to you as a role model. And I think, when you're then having whether it's institutions or individuals within those institutions who are either putting you down, or you're feeling kind of looked over on things when you're putting your all in. I can completely see, and I had an experience when I was a teacher where I worked all the way through COVID, and I know people said teachers had it easy in COVID. I worked all the way through and ran. I know, right? Ran effectively a whole sport program for the entirety of lockdowns, and then was massively overlooked for then someone who was furloughed during that time. And I'm like, that, fair enough. If I wasn't, good enough to do that job, but you thought I was good enough when you didn't furlough me and, got me to do all of those hours and planning.
Because you were of use then. And unfortunately, that's exactly the same situation I found myself in. I was of use at those times. It was useful to push my pressure points at that time with the promise of promotion, because I did the work that other people didn't want to do.
Yeah, and I can see that. I think it's such a, it's almost like the green room of teaching. You're kind of behind the scenes, and there's so much more going on there. And sometimes, and like in your example, you just get to it. Lots of other things happen in life, as we all know they do. But you get to that tipping point, and obviously for you and your experience, you were just at your wit's end with it, and you just needed a change. So when you're looking at this and all of the things happen in the background for you, obviously you made the decision to leave teaching, but how did you make that transition happen? Like, did you have any support along the way? What happened for you?
Very little, to be honest. It was a really difficult time, and I can vividly remember the day that I walked out of the education establishment and didn't go back the same person. I did go back afterwards, but I had a period of time off and then went back briefly and then left again. But the day that I left, I was actually observing my PGCE student in her teaching environment, and we had an agreement, because we taught SEND, that I was going to come in slightly later into the lesson to start my observation on her, so that she had this settling time for the students. Because as soon as I was their familiar face, their safe space, and we always had a settling time at the start of the session before we actually started learning. And I said to her, I will leave you for the first 5 minutes of that lesson to go through that process. It's a really important process. It's a good time for you to build rapport with them and to check in. So, I went about it in a professional manner. It wasn't I'm going to be 5 minutes late because I need to go and grab a coffee. It was constructive. And I was observing
and planned as well.
And planned, and all organised, and it had been pre-agreed with the PGCE teaching board beforehand. It wasn't just something her and I had discussed. And I went in, well, I arrived at the time that I'd said I was going to arrive, and someone else from the management team of the place I was working at the time was stood outside the classroom with all of the support staff from within that classroom. So that trainee teacher was in that classroom with just those students. And she said, "Oh, here you are." I said, "Yes, here I am, ready to observe." He said, "Oh, well, you're late." I said, "No, I'm not late." So, I explained the situation, went about it in a very professional manner. And anyway, I come out of that and had a very blunt email to sent to me after that. We need to discuss this. I'd like to see you in my office, blah, 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 blah. And I sat there and thought, like, I don't need this. I can't cope with this. And I broke. I sat there crying in the office. And I'm sure many, many teachers out there listening to this or watching this can relate to a situation where something's happened and you've not been given the opportunity to explain yourself. And if you have, you've not been listened to. You've not been taken at a professional's value. In teaching, we talk about professional standards that we all must adhere to, the teaching standards. But yet, we're never, if we've done something that other people don't agree with, then we never reflect on those. And I at the time, I rang the doctor to book an appointment because it got to the point where I couldn't function. And the doctor, I explained the situation to the doctor, and he said, "I want you to pack your bag now and go home." I said, "Well, I can't just leave. I've got a governor's meeting tonight. I'm teaching a class in half an hour. I can't just leave." He said, "Yes, you can." He said, you are leaving now, going home, and I will call you when you get home. I now need to call the school or where it is you're working, and I'm going to speak to whoever it is there, and I will speak to you later. So anyway, I just packed up my bag and left and walked out, which was horrible for me as a teacher. The fact that I was teaching in half an hour, I wasn't there for management or anybody else in the college. I was there for my students, my learners, and I walked out, and it was the single most difficult thing I ever had to do in teaching, was walk out. But it was the single most incredible thing that I did for myself. So that was kind of my emotional path out of the actual educational establishment. But actually leaving the workplace was really difficult, because I'm not sure whether it was the place that I was at or whether it was education, but you start to realize the hardest thing for me was realizing how quickly people forget you, especially colleagues. Friendships for me changed overnight. They just were there one day, they weren't the next. One of my colleagues, she was the first person I told that I was going to have a child, and I stood crying in front of her. Years before that, we were really good friends, and when I left, she barely acknowledged that I was leaving, and we haven't spoke since. And
Wow.
I think there are so many of my colleagues that I worked with there that I have never spoken to since. I speak to two, and that's probably about it. So that was difficult, the leaving. And I think when you're taking voluntary redundancy and there's potentially some team left behind, I took voluntary redundancy for personal reasons, but in some situations there is a need for people to take voluntary redundancy and the remainder of a team to stay. I think that creates such resentment and content between people and teams when actually it's out of their control. And I think that was one of the things that I felt and experienced when I left, was there felt like such a resentment to me for leaving. Obviously, I was leaving for selfish reasons, but there was absolutely nothing wrong with being selfish. Leaving teaching the way that I did it for me. I didn't do it for anybody else. And it was the first time in 10 years of teaching that I put myself first.
And I think that's so crucial. There is you put yourself first, your mental health, your happiness. Because I know we've spoken a few times before, haven't we? Around, you yourself feel richer for leaving teaching, and I just want to touch on that, because you've got a lot of transferable skills, not just from your teaching experience, but from your other qualifications and career experience. You've got quite a variety there, which is quite unusual for teachers, actually, when they first begin teaching. I mean, like my experience was I came straight from university, straight into teaching, and then was kind of taught to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And then I was made redundant and was like, well, what do I do now? And then I had to kind of learn. And this is where I work with clients of mine and tutees, whereby I have learned how to, I suppose, translate teacher talk and all the skills that teachers have and the experiences that you have and how transferable they are into every other workplace. Oh my word, if just teachers knew what the language, it's almost like learning French or German or Spanish at school. If you just knew how to translate it, teachers are supreme operators. And I think, you being an entrepreneur now, running your own business, doing all the social media, and all the other bits that you do as well, which we'll touch upon in a moment. But it just demonstrates that, yes, okay, teachers are taught to be teachers. You're kind of institutionalized to think everything you're taught about is like pedagogy and, curriculums and all of this stuff. But fundamentally, the operational work of being a teacher, you are communicating, you are presenting, you are organizing, you are planning, you are doing all of the things which every other career are crying out for, not least the soft skills, which teachers have in such abundance because they're just having conversations all day, every day.
Absolutely.
So on that note, talk to me about what you're doing now. So we talked about Bimbling Books and Beer, which I still love as a word and as a
it rolls
name,
off the tongue.
Try it. Bimbling Books and Beer. What else do you do to kind of supplement that? Because obviously we've spoken about how you just feel so much richer as a person since leaving.
So I think the important thing to recognize here is that I am definitely not earning the amount of money now that I was when I was a teacher. But hear me out on why I'm okay with that. So I left teaching to recover. I walked away with 15 grand in voluntary redundancy money, thinking that it would last me 3 months. I'd set myself some very clear guidelines as to you're going to give yourself 2 months, 3 months to just live, to just explore. I'd booked some trips up to the Peak District to go camping and exploring. I'd booked a trip up to Scotland for a couple of weeks with my granddad. I'd planned loads of walking and filming trips. And yeah, I just gave myself a bit of time to not focus on what I was going to do straight away. Because, like you say, the biggest thing for me was that I'd been institutionalized, and we all are as teachers. We were all institutionalized into thinking that we were educators and that was all we could do, and the terminology that goes with that, like the word of pedagogy or observations or, all of that is what's attached to it. And you lose sight of everything else you can offer society and what you do. And so when I left teaching, I was on a massive journey of rediscovery. And yeah, I didn't want to leave recklessly. So like I say, I left with 15 grand voluntary redundancy money and put very clear sort of guidance in mind. And I started getting out walking, started getting out reading books. I started learning to be on my own a little bit. I had other things going on in my life other than teaching. So I was on a massive journey. And I eventually then realised that I wanted to make content out of it. I wanted to just share that experience with others. And then I kind of got to the end of my guidelines, if you will, where I'd said you need to start looking for a job. And I thought to myself, do I want to go back into education? And I think from the off, the answer was no. I think once you're out of it, you can see everything that's on the inside and the things that don't promote positive mental health for teachers. So yeah, I kind of refocused where I was at in life, looked at all the skills that I've got. As you said, I've got qualifications in quite a lot of things.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to recalibrate where I was at and what I was doing. One thing I will say is you definitely realise how little money you need to survive. And I've done more than survive over the last year. I've thrived, absolutely.
You can see that from your videos, mate.
And on 15 grand. If I told a teacher you were going to have 15 grand for the next year, you'd probably start sweating profusely. But actually, when you need to, you realise what's important in life. So yeah, and from there, I kind of set my sights on content creating. I loved making content. I loved being outdoors. The biggest thing for me was that I'd realised that I wanted to work for myself, whatever that was. And I still craved that passing on knowledge to others. I still craved what I went into teaching for in the first place, which is passing on knowledge. And yeah, I kind of content creating has taken off. I've had quite a few collabs in the first 3 or 4 months of doing it, but then the last couple of months have been really difficult. I haven't. So I had to diversify. And I think as a teacher, you're taught to problem solve. You teach others to problem solve. Look for your skills, look for your strengths, your weaknesses, analyze them. And I kind of, so at the minute I'm settling on, I'm a content creator. I make content. I've run my platform Bimbling Books and Beer, which is now a website. And I do very set sort of series where this summer I'm rolling out one called Tent Box Diaries, where I'm going around Cornwall trying out different campsites. So yeah, but behind that I also needed a money engine to keep money coming in. And at the minute I'm currently selling model trains on eBay with my brother-in-law, which sounds bizarre. I'm not a model train enthusiast at all. I love Thomas the Tank when I was a kid, but I'm not a model train enthusiast in the slightest. But I needed to make money basically, and I think the word I've never used it, so I'm going to use it now. But the word that you touched on, entrepreneur, I think that's kind of what I've become over the last year. I describe it to people as I'm a little bit like Del Boy, and that if there's an opportunity to make some money, then I'll try and sniff it out and make it. And that's kind of where I'm at. It's very different to education, the stability of money, the stability of a 9 to 5 job. But I actually quite like the unpredictability of that, because when you have a good month like I'm currently having at the minute, it's incredible. I've got creative freedom, I've got financial ish freedom, I've got freedom for my own work time. If I put energy and effort into things, I reap the rewards of that. So yeah, I think that transition has been really difficult, but I've definitely not put pressure on myself.
And I think there, like that transition that you made, you've effectively done that off your own back, and you have obviously with some medical advice and help from family and friends and all those kind of things, right? But what you've done there is you've done that transition, and you are, I mean, I in my head, when you were talking about, that you've kind of diversified, you've tried different things, you're working with your brother, all that kind of stuff. It just reminds me about lesson planning, where you make a lesson plan and then 10 minutes into the lesson, or even less sometimes, that lesson plan is out the window and you're doing something else, because you've just followed, opportunities where a child or a group of children have shown a certain intrigue into something, or something's having success. You kind of go with
the golden thread, they call it, isn't it? You have to pull on that golden thread. And we teach that so regularly in the classroom, that inquisitive nature and this, that, and the other, but very rarely do we encourage it. You're going to leave education and give yourself a bit of time to discover what you want to do in life. Because for me, the national curriculum is great, but it lacks key things. It lacks this element of discovery, and especially now with the new guidelines in that people are going to stay in education until they're 18 to gain maths and English qualifications, which I completely support. But we're losing people that went into trades at the age of 16. I've got a family member who left school at the age of 16 and went into Tesco's as a trolley boy. And he was then the general manager of a whole area of Tesco's by the end of his life, retired with an ending salary pension. But if he'd have left with no maths and English skills, he wouldn't have had that opportunity until he was 18. And by then it could have potentially been too late. And I think, whilst I recognise that maths and English are important, I left school 20 years ago with 1 GCSE. I've now got a degree in outdoor leadership. I've got a master's in education. I'm a qualified PT instructor. I've got various different outdoor leader qualifications. I'm a qualified chef. I've worked in, fantastic restaurants around Cornwall. So that's just one example of how discovery and recalibrating has worked. The education system failed me. And I've ended up where I am today now as an entrepreneur. I
love that, because I think the word entrepreneur kind of is made out to be you have to own a big tech company.
I think somebody who's making money, finding a way to make money on the side.
Exactly that. So I think if you reflect back, and we've spoken about the great things about teaching, but do you ever miss your teaching career? Do you ever kind of think, or where do you sit with that?
Yeah, so I've actually prepared a little list for this prior to us having a conversation.
Oh, nice.
Because this was a tricky one, actually, because there are things that I miss and there are things that I don't miss. So the things that I miss are the income stability, obviously. Yep. As a teacher, it's set. You have 6-7 weeks holiday a year as well, which you get paid through. It's easier to enjoy a holiday when you're going to get paid. I miss the structure and the routine most of all. I think I miss getting up in the morning and going to work and being in doing certain things, knowing what I'm going to be doing. As teachers, we plan for an entire year.
Yeah.
So what your life's going to look like for the whole year, down to the minute of a lesson plan or the minute of a scheme of work, where you've planned, like, in this lesson we're going to be doing this activity. That is some incredible structure. So I miss that. Most of all, I miss the banter with my students. And when I say banter, I use that term loosely. The sort of classroom decor, if you will. Like, I really miss being in a classroom with students and having that back and forth and getting to know them on, a personal level, if you will, not, but getting to know that
Yes, yeah, yeah.
student and to be able to assess their value and see where they're going in life. I really miss that. And I really miss the long-term planning. Like, I'm a planner, and I think as
Mhm.
teachers, if you don't go into teaching if you're not good at planning, unfortunately. You
Sure.
have to be good at planning. So yeah, I miss that, and I miss the storytelling element of teaching, if you will. Things that I
Mm.
don't miss.
Haha, here we
Um,
go. Here's the tea.
yeah. So the constant performance tracking.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I said at the start of this was I maintained outstanding for however many years in a row. Just having that statistic in my head should be wrong,
Mm.
because that doesn't prove my worth as a teacher in the classroom or as an individual. But that's what we're taught to recognize. And the whole of the education system is graded based on that.
Yeah.
And I think there's some serious questions that need to be asked about that. I mean, that's a whole political movement which we're not trying to start, but um, the performance tracking element of it, and how education establishments are ultimately businesses, because I think people forget that schools, yes, they are nationally funded and this, that, and the other, but they are businesses at the end of the day as well. They still
Mhm.
make money. Um, so that performance tracking is always there, whether you see it on the front line or not. Behind a teacher, behind what they're teaching in the classroom, that teacher's performance will be tracked out of the classroom. And that's one thing that really affects the mental health of teachers. I know it did for me, and I know it did for a lot of others. I've seen teachers break down into tears before they'd go into a classroom to teach, because they were being observed that day and the grade mattered for the following year, or whether they were going to get a promotion or not. I now know it didn't matter, because I maintained outstanding and still didn't get the promotions. But we're led to believe that performance tracking is so important. So I don't miss that. My
Mm.
value now is not spiritual, but it is kind of like, I know when I close my laptop at the end of the day, if I've done a hard day's work, I can feel proud of myself, and I can see the smaller things that I've achieved. So yeah, I don't miss that about it. I don't miss the endless pressure to improve that comes with performance tracking. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking to myself, why is it that as a teacher, nothing was ever good enough? Now, I know that sounds pessimistic, but hear me out. But we are always taught as teachers that you can always do better. We tell
Mhm.
students that you can always do better. So, but I have an issue with that, because sometimes you are enough in life. There is there is a ceiling on everything in life.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not, the world's your oyster, you can achieve everything. No, I'm sorry, but you just can't. Um, and I'm quite a realistic person, and yeah, I don't miss that constant, like, well, you could do better at this, you could do better at that. Especially for me, if I was an outstanding teacher, there was always points of things that I could do better. And I can remember sitting in meetings where, my line manager at the time would say, well, I've got to put something in this box for improving. I've got to give you something to improve, but I can't think of anything. Well, why? Why can't you just
Mm.
say, you know, reach maximum performance in education? In, let's say, sport, in your example, we do. Maximum performance or maximum performance output is something that we recognise quite regularly. So why
Mm.
can't we do that with teaching? Why can't we say, do you know what, this teacher is, they've reached a high potential, and that's it. Their level of teaching is fantastic. Um, I don't miss that. I don't miss that feeling of you're never good enough. Like,
Yeah.
that's a horrible feeling to sit with. And as teachers, we always sit with that. And there are so many people watching
Mm.
this that will feel that and will go, I don't feel like I'm good enough. I come home every day and don't feel like I've done a good enough job. Um, and yeah, this culture of external validation that's built around education, that with degradings, and my heart goes out to teachers like that teacher a couple of years ago that had took her life because of
It was an Ofsted report,
an
wasn't it? Yeah.
Ofsted report. And I just, you know Ofsted were into the education establishment I was in when I was leaving, and during the point of my first breakdown, they were due. I went off, not because of Ofsted, but I went off. Whilst I was off for a couple of months, Ofsted come in. They didn't get the result that they wanted, and I come back in, and the pressure was even worse on me and others. But I said, well, I wasn't here for Ofsted. So why do I now need to improve? Why am I being tied with the same brush? But that's how it works. It's not just
Yeah, of
one, it's a
course.
whole. And that's the world that education has become in the UK, unfortunately. We are so um, fascinated by grades. What grade has that school got? What grade has that school got? But that doesn't measure the people within that school. It
Mhm.
measures it against a very set of rigid structures and constraints set out by people that are not educators.
And I think, yeah, and I want to pick up on that performance tracking side of things, because a lot of this is around that kind of external judgment of, people from the outside looking in, or even people from the inside looking at, in and tracking performance. Now, performance is tracked everywhere, every career, whether you're, in a teaching role, whether you're in a sales role, whether you're in, even if you're working in like a supermarket, right? There is still this level of performance tracking. How many
Yeah,
customers have you served? How many sales have you made? Or
yeah,
even as an entrepreneur, are the books balancing themselves? How much profit are you making? How many,
yeah,
all of those things, right? They're always tracked. I think the bit for me with teaching is the subjectivity of being judged by someone who is perceived to know more than what you do. And like you said, like this never-ending cycle of always improving. Now, I'm a big believer of always wanting to look for improvements, but sometimes you just go, actually, we did a really good job there, and you should
yeah,
just say, actually, that should be an example of excellent teaching.
yeah,
Because I know, and I think a lot of teachers, like you say, listening to this, you'll teach an outstanding lesson, everything will go right, the kids will be super engaged, your resources are on point, you were actually really like performing really well, because a lot of it is acting, right?
yeah,
And then you'll go into another lesson or another day or whatever it is, and the kids are disengaged, or they don't quite pick up on the key terms, it doesn't quite go in the right way, you feel a little bit down, and actually you look back at that one and you think, oh, that was an example of how it went really well,
yeah,
and then I haven't had it really well or it's not gone as well in this other one, and how can I reflect upon that to make it more like that? But like you say, that even that excellent lesson, which you had a really good time in, that it was really well responded to, can still be judged as not good enough, or like
yeah,
that you have to always consistently improve. It's like,
yeah, yeah,
for me, especially coming from sport, taking education out of it, if you go into a sports game and you win that game, yes, there are learnings from it, of course there are,
yeah,
but you celebrate the win and then you
yeah,
prepare for the next one, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I don't think that happens. And one thing which I've experienced in my career change when I left teaching, went into briefly recruitment and then into business development and sales and other bits like that, is you aren't necessarily judged subjectively. You are judged objectively, whether that's, more formative KPIs, which some businesses have,
yeah,
or whether that's, you have this target, go and get it, right?
yeah,
And for me, as a sportsman, and other people are quite like goal driven, I know what I've got to achieve. It's here, right?
yeah,
Now, where I see myself as a performer is I see that as that's your baseline, is how much can you achieve over that? And maybe
yeah,
that's, the sport in me, played quite a lot of high level sport in my time. But what I'm not judged on is someone looking at me day to day, standing over my shoulder here going,
yeah,
I just want to question that. Why are you doing that? And you're not then trying to, prove yourself by having
yeah,
a conversation over someone's opinion of what you're doing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because
And that's
education and
that's
sorry.
the one. That's the thing that I don't miss. I like that was the thing that I really had an issue with, because when I was trained to become a teacher, because you are taught to become a teacher,
Yeah.
I was taught that it was my classroom. When that door was closed and I had students in there, that was my stage, if you will. That was I planned it, I prepared for it, I had the knowledge to pass on. That was my space. So I did have an issue with people coming into that space that weren't more qualified than me, weren't more experienced, didn't know those students, didn't stand there and have to deal with the situations that were going on at home or in their personal lives every single day. And I
Mm.
loved that. but they weren't aware of those things. And then for them to stand there and question every tiny little detail that I do. And yes, if I can justify why I've done that, then brilliant. But why should I have to justify every single movement that I do? That was one thing that I didn't miss about teaching, having to justify every single action that I took.
Yeah.
And I think we're taught to have autonomy as teachers, but then as soon as we get into the role, it's taken away from us. Why are we autonomous in teaching, but we can't manage ourselves? Or we can't be allowed to manage ourselves? You know, why do we need to be tracked like that in that way? So yeah, I think those are the things that I miss and don't miss. And I think whilst I recognise performance tracking and the constants to improve, you know, I have that in me now. You know, I've sat through January and February. I reached out to 40 odd brands to collab with, and I had some pretty harsh no's back. It resulted in nothing. And I sat here and went, how am I going to move this forward? What am I going to do? What am I going to improve to make some money or to make this go forward? So then I started building a website and started looking at different projects and, you know, critiquing how I approach a task or what I'm going to do. And I have that ability within me. I had that ability within me as a teacher. So why didn't people allow me to follow that? You know?
Yeah. And I think that then comes into that transition, the ability to transition from that teaching world, that sphere where you are a teacher, into the big wide world of, you know, teaching is a career and education is an industry.
Yeah.
And there are some like linked to it. But then there's all of these other careers and industries out here where, like we've said before in this conversation, you know, there are so many transferable skills between them. When you transition, like, do you think having someone who's kind of done that before, so someone who had moved from teaching and had, you know, gone into them, do you think you would have liked to have leaned on someone like that before to help with kind of where?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, I made a video, which was the video that drawn us together, where I briefly said, you know, that I'd left teaching and this is what I'm doing now. And, you know, it's basically a summary of this hour conversation in 30 seconds or whatever. But yeah, I wish I'd have had something like that. And I've had so many teachers reach out to me since then to say, oh, you know, I really wish I could do what you've done, but I can't because of this and I can't because of that. And it makes me so incredibly sad to think of so many teachers out there that are trapped and being gaslighted in education the way that I am. And I hear it so regularly. I still know people in education. You know, I'm a school governor, and I still am well within the education system. And it's happening more and more and more. And I really wish there was people out there that, you know, could validate what these people are feeling and go, actually, you know, that is a valid feeling. There is a way out for you. You just need to find it.
Because I mean, that's and what you've just said there is exactly the reason why I founded Reframe Ed. Is it's I wish I could do that. Well, actually, you bloody well can. You know,
you
absolutely. really, really can. You've got all the skills, you've got all the knowledge. You just need to understand how to translate that into whether you go and start your own business. And like you've said today, that's not an easy road. You know, you don't just start your own business and then suddenly, you know, get all of your previous salary back. It's a long, hard road, which, you know, you and I are both going down at the moment. But there are other jobs which can provide, you know, stable income, whether that's in sales, whether that's in, you know, customer service, whether that's in project management. There are loads of other ways in which teachers have that transferable skill set. They just don't necessarily know how to talk about it in the language which a hiring manager would. And that the whole reason why I founded Reframe Ed is to help with that, I guess, that corporate language translation, because that's what I've had to learn. I've had to go from leave teaching, get an opportunity here, then go and interview for, you know, quite a high level job in a business. And I've had to quickly learn, okay, cool. So suddenly, you know, I'm not talking about lesson planning. I'm talking about, you know, organizational skills. I'm not talking about behavior management. I'm talking about, you know, leading teams, and I'm not talking about having conversations with parents. I'm talking about stakeholders. And it's how you transfer those just reframing effectively what teaching is, which is exactly the same as what a normal, let's say, normal job, an other job is.
Another job. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, and that's effectively where I sit as a mentor and a coach with teachers, is trying to help them understand that teaching is great, and I loved teaching, and I'm not trying to take teachers away from that if they don't want to, but it's about exploring the opportunities, like you have, exploring that opportunity outside of education, whether or not, they go through as a difficult time as what you have, or whether they're actually just, somewhat unhappy and kind of somewhat feel trapped. Actually, they can explore the opportunity, they can see what's happening and understand that they have the skills and the confidence to kind of go, I could do something else. And I'm not promising that every job's going to have, a 7, 8, 6 week summer holiday.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't happen.
No.
But if you enjoy the job you're doing, you're happy, and you're coming home and you're not having to mark or do lesson planning until 11 o'clock at night, you get more, you buy back more time day to day. Which is where I speak to teachers, and they're like, I get to school early, sometimes it's 7 o'clock in the morning, I get to school early. I finish school at, let's say, 5 after the school day's finished and you've done all the thing. Then I go home and I do my marking. I, lesson plan for the next day. All these things. It's like, but where's your time to be you?
Yeah.
Like, where is it? So I think my final question to you, Dan, is who do you think you are now compared to who you were as a teacher? And we've covered a lot of
and I did prepare some notes because I found this one quite difficult to kind of reflect on. But I think the thing for me, teaching taught me who I didn't want to be. I went into teaching for very set things, which we said at the start of this. Like, I had in mind, I wanted the career progression. I wanted the stable financial stability. I wanted a respected career. But with all of that, throughout that entire process, it taught me lots of things that I didn't want to be. And I think realizing that kind of shifted a lot of things for me. I think the first thing is that it made me realize that I didn't want to work for somebody else, not just in education, but across the board. I've come to that conclusion that I don't want to work for somebody else. I want to work for myself. And that's a massive shift, because I've always been taught that, I've got to have a job working for somebody else. But actually, I think I've now discovered that I want to work for myself. If I make an opportunity, I want to benefit from it. Sounds really selfish, sounds quite arrogant, but it's really not. It's quite a strong place to be, actually, and that's a very different shift. I think there's definitely skills that I use from teaching, like my storytelling, my communication skills, guiding people through things. But I think actually, like, it's made me become not philosophical, but like, I'm about different things now. So I'm about filmmaking, storytelling, business, self-expression. I kind of track my own progress, and if I get a deal come through, a collab, then I go, okay, well, I've achieved something then. So I think, as a person now, who am I now compared to what I was before? I was institutionalized, I think, to believe that I needed to be working for somebody else, whereas now I feel a little bit more free. I manage my own time. I work around my life, not for my life, if that makes sense. As a teacher, you're told when you are going to have time off. You're told when you're going to work, when you're not going to work. Whereas now I make those opportunities myself. I pick my daughter up from school, bring her home, we have time together, she gets in bed, and then I do more work. Now, it might sound like teaching, where you do that and you start lesson planning, but actually I don't mind the fact that I do more work when she's then asleep, because it gave me the freedom to be able to take longer to do the school pickup, or to take her to the park, or to fully give myself to that moment. Whereas before, I was coming home from teaching and my focus was still on teaching. Let's get this done because I've got to do this and this lesson planning, or I've got to get ready for this, or I've got to get ready for that. Whereas now it's like, I don't have to get ready for this, that, and I mean, I do have to get ready for stuff, but it's like just a continuation. Work stops because my personal life needs that time, and then work just continues. And it's not a, I think with education, with teaching, your personal life stops. When work stops, your personal life doesn't just continue. You're still switched on to teaching and to work. And yeah, I think that's a massive shift for me. It's a really hard question to answer who I am now compared to I'm a lot more free, I'm a lot more happy, I'm a lot more content. I'm less sort of driven on performance indicators and how I'm performing. You know, I look at how things make me feel rather than what grade I've achieved. If I have a good month earning money, I kind of go, brilliant, I've worked for that this month, not having being an entrepreneur has got a lot to answer for, because if you put the work in, you reap the rewards.
Yep.
Whereas if you put the work in as a teacher, you still walk away with the same salary at the end of the day.
100%. And I suppose that does happen in other careers as well, doesn't it? I mean, there are other jobs where you are salaried and you're effectively trading your time for money, right? And being an entrepreneur is very, very different, and owning your own business is very different, because you're having the choice of, like you say, you're choosing when to work, when to have focus on another thing, and it works. And like you say, it's a meritocracy, right? I don't always say the harder you work, the better, the smarter you work, I think you will reap the rewards with it. But what I think, and what I've found in careers outside of education, is there is more flexibility with regards to, okay, cool, so you've got pick up at this time, even if you're not confident enough to become an entrepreneur and do what we've done, start your own business. And actually a sensible transition is going from teaching into another paid job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other employers, and teaching is very, it's and like we've said, it's, this is your term time, this is when half term is, this is when your holiday is, you are in from this point in the morning till this point in the afternoon, and this is what you're doing throughout the day. And there is a structure to that, and there is a comfort in that. Other careers, very similar, but you'll have a little bit of flexibility with regards to, okay, cool, so I need to have, some time off here so I can book some annual leave, or, I need to just adapt my working hours. I know a lot of friends of mine who work on annualized hours. So their business doesn't matter when they do this, it's just that they do the hours that they are contracted to. So there are opportunities out there to have a certain amount of freedom. Now, obviously, it is a job, and we can't get around the fact that, you are contracted to X amount of hours, but employers out there outside of education are a lot more flexible than those inside education.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes back to the institutionalized thing that we said, isn't it? Education is an institution, and not just for the learners, but more so for the professionals that are involved in that. You become a part of that institution. I now don't ever work in normal years. So I don't work in 2026. I work in 25 to 26, 26 to 27.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether I'm in my own head on that, or whether other educators work that
He's
way.
a tax accountant.
But we are taught to, to go, as teachers, you're taught to go academic year. And I always say, is it this academic year or last academic year? Well, actually, no, there is no such thing. But you work in that manner.
Yeah.
And when you come out of that, it's quite hard to shift that perspective and go, well, actually, no. I mean, for me now, I'm working in a tax year. So it's still 25, 26 for me. But you do come out of a job and go, well, you could go into another job and go, my holiday runs from December to December, or January to December. And I think education's got so much to answer for in terms of how it builds you up as a teacher. You become part of that institution, not just in the way that you teach, the way that you speak, the skills that you apply, but your whole life becomes consumed by that practice. And like you say, there are other jobs that have restraints where you have to be in at a certain time and you have to work a certain amount of hours, but you don't become that job. as much as you do in education. And I think it does, I keep using the word, but it does gaslight people into feeling like they can't leave. How do I leave that? How do I get off this never-ending carousel that's going round? And I think that's why when you reached out to me and said, let's have a chat, I really wanted to give it that, because, for me, if there was anyone thinking about leaving teaching, I'd say you can absolutely do it, but you have to be realistic.
Yeah.
You have to be pragmatic with it. The first thing is plan financially. Can you financially plan to do it? Can you financially do it? Sorry, if you're taking voluntary redundancy, work out how long that's going to last you, by which point you're going to start looking for a job. During that time, before that, what jobs are you going to be looking for? What areas are you going to be exploring? Have set guide points and timelines on that. Don't be beating yourself up about it, but have set guidelines and timelines on it, like I did. Don't romanticize that transition. My story is very different to, I'm sure, what a lot of your colleagues will be, in that I've left and I have romanticized it. And luckily, I've managed to find a way that I'm making money. But yeah, I did leave with very set guide points and timelines. And I said, I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be doing that. And actually, yeah, I think it's really important to not put pressure on yourself immediately when you leave, because you have to almost have a come down from being in teaching. And yeah, be gentle on yourself with your way out of education. Don't feel like you have to have all the answers. And the key point that I've put here is that the world is a much bigger place than the institution of education, 100%. Which I think is key. Like, as a teacher, you're taught that education is the be all and end all, and that's what you're going to be doing forever. I think that one of the government adverts for teaching is find a career for life in teaching or something like that. And I think that's good, but also, like, when you get on that carousel, then you're straight away, you've been gaslighted into a job where you think, I can't leave now because I'm on this for life.
And I think, where I'm positioning Reframe Ed with the support in which I provide to teachers currently in education exploring opportunities, it's, I'm not telling you that you have to leave. I'm saying this is how you could leave, and this is your I guess your skills and your personality traits, and we go through all of those things in the mentoring that then link you to a potential industry or a potential role. But at the same time, it can just enrich you and make you a better teacher because you're understanding yourself more.
Absolutely.
So, look, for anyone that's watched this, if you're a teacher and you've got that niggle in the back of your mind saying, I don't know whether I want to do this forever.
Yeah.
Reframe Ed, we've got a free quiz just to see how ready you are with that next step. Just ask you a few questions, pretty open, open questions, just to see how ready you are. Send those questions off. You'll then receive a free ebook from me where I've kind of just put it into an 8-step plan to how you can go from, leaving teaching into what that next career looks like for you. And then after that, we can look at one-to-one mentorship and stuff like that. But Dan, thank you so much for your time. Do you want to plug BBB, as I keep coining it?
Yes. So I'm on Instagram and TikTok. My handle is @BimblingBooksBeer. It's quite a mouthful, but it's not. And I just launched a brand new website, which is bimblingbooksbeer.co.uk. My email is dan@bimblingbooksbeer.co.uk. But you can get hold of me through my website. If anyone if a teacher out there is watching this and wants to chat through pretty much what we've talked through, the transition, you're thinking about doing it, you're unsure what to do, then reach out or follow me on social media, where I've now started talking a little bit more openly about my progression and where I've come from. It's something that might feature in my content moving forward, but if you want to see what somebody on the other side of teaching looks like and what they're building, then I'd definitely check me out. So
amazing. And I'll stick the website in the comments to this video as well.
Lovely. Thank you
very much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and
lovely.
We'll talk again very, very soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
So